Michael Myers. Michael's first victim comes within the opening minutes of the movie, and here's the detail: he's only 6 years old. We experience the entire sequence through his eyes, as if we were standing in the shoes of the future killer. Michael watches his older sister, Judith Myers, making out with her boyfriend in the living room through the window. The two head upstairs to her bedroom. After the boyfriend leaves, Michael walks inside, grabs a kitchen knife, and starts climbing the stairs, where he finds a clown mask lying in the hallway. The very same one Judith's boyfriend had been wearing just minutes earlier to jokingly scare her. Michael puts it on and walks into the bedroom. Judith is completely distracted when Michael attacks her, killing her, without any argument or apparent reason. But the most unforgettable moment comes immediately afterward. The camera finally reveals who's been behind the mask all along. A 6-year-old boy standing in the front yard, holding the knife while his parents arrive home. It's a simple image, but it became one of the most iconic shots in horror history. After that, Michael spends 15 years in complete silence inside a psychiatric hospital, until he escapes and continues adding more victims throughout the film. Jason Voorhees. In Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees doesn't kill anyone. The person responsible for the murders is actually his mother, Pamela Voorhees, who lost her sanity after Jason drowned at Crystal Lake while the camp counselors were distracted. Jason's true debut as a killer doesn't happen until Friday the 13th, Part 2. The movie opens by following Alice Hardy, the sole survivor of the first film. She's trying to move on after killing Pamela, but her peace doesn't last very long. Alone in her apartment, Alice begins hearing strange noises. When she opens the refrigerator, she's greeted by a horrifying sight. Pamela's severed head has been placed inside, almost like a shrine created by someone completely obsessed with her. This is the moment when Jason makes his first appearance as a killer. He suddenly appears and attacks Alice with a sharp object. The scene is so quick that you can barely see him, only the blow that takes her life. The scene also breaks one of horror's biggest unwritten rules. Normally, the survivor of the first movie is expected to be safe in the sequel. Friday the 13th Part 2 does the exact opposite. Freddy Krueger. In A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's first victims never appear on screen. Long before the events of the movie, Freddy had already murdered several children while he was still alive. After being killed by the residents of Springwood, he simply came back even worse. In other words, he died and got an upgrade. Now he could kill people inside their dreams. The first on-screen victim is Tina Gray. From the very beginning of the film, she's haunted by nightmares involving a man with a burned face, an old fedora, a striped sweater, and a glove fitted with razor-sharp blades. Nobody believes her dreams are real until she spends the night with her boyfriend, Rod, and falls asleep. That's when Freddy truly makes his debut. Inside the dream, Tina hears a strange noise and decides to investigate. Outside, she's chased by Freddy in one of the film's most terrifying sequences.
Please, God.
This is God.
Where he seems capable of appearing anywhere, no matter where she tries to run. While Rod watches in complete confusion, Tina suddenly begins being attacked by an invisible force. Her body is dragged across the walls, then lifted all the way onto the bedroom ceiling. Rod desperately tries to help, but he can't even see what's causing it. When the nightmare finally ends, Tina is dead, and Rod becomes the prime suspect in her murder, Leatherface. In the 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you blink, you'll miss it. Leatherface's first kill lasts only about 4 seconds. There's no music, no warning, nobody says a single word. Even so, it became one of the most copied scenes in horror history. Everything begins when a group of young friends get stranded in rural Texas during a road trip. Needing gas, Kirk decides to explore a nearby house while his girlfriend, Pam, waits outside. The place immediately feels wrong. The furniture is made from bones and animal remains. You can instantly tell something is terribly wrong inside that house. Kirk walks in, calling out to see if anyone's home. He slowly approaches a hallway. Then, without warning, Leatherface appears for the very first time. Without hesitating for even a second, he knocks Kirk to the ground with a single hammer strike. Kirk twitches for a few moments while Leatherface drags his body into the room, then slams the heavy metal door shut. End of scene. Just like that. It's precisely the speed of the moment that makes it so terrifying. There's no chase, no speech, no opportunity to fight back. It feels as though Kirk simply walked into the wrong place, and his story ended before he even understood what was happening. Chucky. In Child's Play, Chucky wastes no time showing that even before becoming a doll, he was already trouble. Charles Lee Ray was a serial killer known as the Lakeshore Strangler, and he only became a good guy doll after using a voodoo ritual to escape death. In other words, being a killer doll is basically his second career. Chucky's first victim as a toy is Maggie Peterson, Karen Barkley's friend, who's looking after young Andy for the evening. Andy insists that his new doll is alive. Of course, nobody believes him.
Chucky wants to watch the 9 o'clock news.
Sure he does.
While Maggie is alone in the apartment, she hears strange noises and goes to investigate. That's when Chucky finally makes his move. Hidden from view, he catches her off guard with a hammer strike, knocking her off balance and sending her crashing through the apartment's massive kitchen window. The fall from the 9th floor leaves no room for doubt. The doll is alive and far more dangerous than anyone imagined. That scene completely changes the direction of the movie. From that moment on, the suspense fully transforms into a slasher. And there's another clever detail. Since only Maggie and Andy were inside the apartment, the police begin suspecting the little boy. While everyone searches for a human killer, Chucky continues moving around completely unnoticed. Jigsaw. In Saw, if you call John Kramer a murderer, he'd probably tell you that you completely misunderstood him. In his mind, Jigsaw never kills anyone. He simply creates tests so people can prove they truly value their own lives. It's a completely twisted philosophy, but it's exactly what turned him into one of horror's most unique villains. The first trap presented in the film belongs to Paul Leahy. Before the events of the main story, Paul had suffered from severe depression and even attempted to his own life. To Jigsaw, that meant Paul was wasting the greatest gift anyone could ever receive, life. So he decides to teach him a lesson. Paul wakes up trapped inside a massive maze made entirely of barbed wire. A pre-recorded tape explains the rules. If he stays where he is, he'll remain trapped forever. His only way out is to crawl through the entire maze before time runs out. It's a challenge that's impossible to ignore and almost impossible to survive. Paul tries desperately to escape, but he can't reach the exit before the timer expires. Years later, however, the series reveals that Paul wasn't actually Jigsaw's first chronological test subject. That distinction belongs to Cecil Adams. Cecil was a drug addict who broke into the rehabilitation clinic run by Jill Tuck, John Kramer's wife. During the robbery, Cecil slammed a door into Jill, accidentally causing her to miscarry the couple's unborn child. That tragedy, combined with John's terminal cancer diagnosis, became the event that gave birth to Jigsaw. Consumed by grief, John kidnaps Cecil and traps him inside the knife chair trap. To escape, Cecil must press his face against several razor-sharp blades to reach the key that will set him free. Cecil manages to escape, but instead of running away and appreciating the second chance he'd been given, he immediately attacks John in a fit of rage. His attempt at revenge becomes his downfall. He falls into a tangled mass of barbed wire and dies on the spot. Even so, Paul's trap remains the first one audiences were ever introduced to. The trap that established the twisted philosophy which transformed John Kramer into one of the most unforgettable villains in horror movie history. Pennywise. In it, most people consider Georgie's death to be Pennywise's first victim, and it's easy to understand why. It's one of the most iconic opening scenes in modern horror. The sequence begins almost innocently. It's raining, and little Georgie heads outside to play with a paper boat his older brother Bill made for him. The boat floats down the street before disappearing into a storm drain. When Georgie walks over to retrieve it, he finds a friendly clown waiting for him below. It's Pennywise. He chats with Georgie in a warm, inviting voice, offers to give him his paper boat back, and gently convinces the boy to come a little closer. But the friendliness doesn't last long. The moment Georgie reaches for the boat, the clown reveals his true nature and tears the boy's arm clean off. Georgie desperately tries to run away, but he's dragged into the storm drain. It's an opening that sends one message loud and clear. In this world, no one is safe, not even a child. And it's Georgie's death that drives the entire story, as Bill refuses to accept his brother's disappearance and eventually brings together the Losers Club to confront the creature. But don't be fooled. Georgie is nowhere near Pennywise's first victim. The creature has been hunting in that area for centuries, awakening every 27 years to feed on children's fear. And the series Welcome to Derry reveals that it was already there long before the town of Derry even existed. Back then, it hunted the tribe that lived in the region. In other words, its list of victims is far too long to fit into a single video.
Prepare to meet thy God!
But there's one death that's more important than all the others, because it's the death that created Pennywise. In 1908, a circus arrives in Derry. One of its performers is a real clown, an ordinary man named Bob Gray, a widower. He's not a monster, just a tired father trying to make children laugh. He creates a clown act for the kids of Derry and names the character Pennywise the Dancing Clown.
Pennywise, the dancing clown!
One night, while smoking alone near the circus grounds, Bob is approached by a young boy emerging from the woods. The child tells him how much the local children love his performance. Then he asks for help, claiming his mother is sick somewhere in the forest. Bob follows him and is never seen again. It's heavily implied that the boy was actually the entity itself, which killed Bob Gray and stole his face, his name, and even his clown persona. The clown that terrorizes generations of children is nothing more than the stolen identity of a man who only wanted to make kids smile. The entity realized how fascinated the children of Derry were by that clown, so it simply became him. And there's one final detail that makes the story even crueler. Bob Gray had a daughter named Ingrid who spent decades searching for her father, believing he was still trapped somewhere inside that creature.
To Papa.
That same Ingrid, now an elderly woman, is Mrs. Kirsch, the old lady who invites Beverly in for tea in It Chapter 2, Art the Clown. Anyone who's watched Terrifier will always remember Dawn's death, but that's actually only the third kill in the movie. And there's another detail many people forget. Art didn't make his debut there. Depending on how you count it, he actually has two different first kills, because he first appeared 3 years earlier. Before becoming the new face of modern horror, Art debuted in the 2013 anthology film All Hallows Eve. The movie follows a babysitter watching a series of mysterious VHS tapes, each one revealing another disturbing story involving the clown. Within those recordings, the first victim we see is a gas station attendant. After being thrown out of the station, Art lures the employee behind the building and brutally dismembers him. Right there, he establishes the trait that would define him forever: extreme violence, mixed with an unbelievably disturbing sense of humor. By the end of the anthology, things become even worse. Art crosses the barrier between the videotape and the real world, turning the stories into reality. His first victims outside the recordings are the children Ia and Timmy, who were under Sarah's care. It's a cruel ending that makes one thing perfectly clear: nobody is safe, not even the people who seem to be watching the events unfold from the outside. Then in 2016's Art's first victim on Halloween night is Steve, the owner of the pizza shop who throws Art out after his bizarre behavior in the restroom. The clown returns shortly afterward, decapitates Steve, and also kills the employee, Ramon. Only after that do we get the infamous hacksaw scene with Dawn, Norman Bates. In Psycho, Norman Bates' most famous victim wasn't actually his first. The first victim we see is Marion Crane. After stealing money from her employer, Marion flees town and eventually stops at the isolated Bates Motel during a storm. Norman seems like nothing more than a shy, polite young man. Their conversation is so meaningful that Marion decides to return the money and start her life over.
I'd like to go back and try to pull myself out of it.
Before leaving the next morning, she steps into the shower. That's when everything changes. As the water runs, a shadow slowly appears behind the shower curtain. Within seconds, the figure bursts into the bathroom and attacks Marion. The sequence lasts less than a minute, but it became legendary thanks to its frantic editing, Bernard Herrmann's unforgettable violin score, and the iconic image of water swirling down the drain. The most remarkable part is that Hitchcock kills off the character who appeared to be the movie's main protagonist halfway through the story. In 1960, that was practically unheard of. Audiences fully expected to follow Marion until the very end. Instead, Hitchcock completely shattered that expectation. But years before the events of the film, Norman had already poisoned both his own mother and her lover. Those were actually his first victims. Unable to accept what he'd done, his mind created a second personality, his own mother. From then on, it was Mother who committed the murders whenever Norman felt that a woman represented some kind of threat. Pinhead. It's funny to think that Pinhead became the face of the Hellraiser franchise despite appearing on screen for less than 10 minutes in the original film. And there's another interesting detail. Officially, his name isn't even Pinhead. In the original credits, the character is listed simply as Lead Cenobite. The nickname came from fans, and it stuck forever. The first victim we see is Frank Cotton, a man completely obsessed with pushing pleasure beyond every possible limit. After traveling the world searching for new experiences, Frank finally gets his hands on the mysterious Lament configuration, a puzzle box capable of opening a gateway to another dimension. Frank believes he's about to experience the ultimate sensation. Well, he does, just not in the way he expected. The moment he solves the puzzle, the entire room changes. Chains burst out of nowhere and hook into every part of his body. Within seconds, Frank is dragged into that hellish dimension. Shortly afterward, Pinhead arrives and finds what's left of Frank. The most interesting thing is that Pinhead doesn't behave like a traditional slasher villain. He doesn't randomly hunt people the way Michael Myers or Jason does. The Cenobites follow a very specific rule. They only appear when someone willingly chooses to open the box. Frank wasn't randomly selected. He'd literally invited that fate upon himself by searching for sensations beyond human limits. Ghostface. In Scream, almost everyone remembers Casey Becker's death as the franchise's first kill, but there's one detail that often goes unnoticed. She's actually the second victim, and if we follow the story chronologically, she doesn't even hold that title. 1 year before the events of the movie, Billy Loomis and Stu Maker had already murdered Maureen Prescott, Sydney's mother. The film's opening is a true masterclass in suspense. Casey is home alone when she receives what seems like an innocent phone call. The stranger begins talking about horror movies, asks playful questions, and sounds like nothing more than someone trying to pass the time. But little by little, the conversation changes. The caller reveals that he's watching the house, then proposes a game. Answer horror movie trivia correctly to save your boyfriend's life. When the backyard lights suddenly switch on, Casey sees Steve tied to a chair. The tension rises with every question until she gets one wrong. Ironically, it's the same question that still tricks a lot of people today. Who was the killer in the first Friday the 13th?
Jason! Jason! Jason!
But the correct answer is Pamela Voorhees. Ghostface keeps his promise. Steve becomes the first victim we actually see on screen. Moments later, Casey is attacked as well. That opening completely reinvented modern horror. It pays tribute to Psycho by killing off the movie's biggest star almost immediately. It plays with the audience's knowledge of slasher films, and it introduces the concept that would allow the franchise to last for decades. Anyone can wear the Ghostface mask.
What's the matter, Sydney? You look like you've seen a ghost.
The real mystery is never who survives, it's who's behind the mask this time, without a doubt. Scream has one of the greatest openings opening scenes in horror history. And if you want to see more openings just as unforgettable, click the video on your screen and watch Horror Movie Openings Nobody Saw Coming. I'll see you there.